something.
Well, I would say, of course, the president's desire to continue to go after ISIS-K has not changed.
And then just one last one on that, unrelated. The issue of immigration, the ruling from the parliamentarian that legalization for Dreamers can't be part of the reconciliation is currently crafted. Given this is a top priority for a key voting bloc, Latinos here in this White House, how personally engaged might the president get on this? Do you guys have specific alternative proposals that have a chance of actually getting passed under this Congress?
Well, there are a number of senators who have spoken to their intention of putting forward alternative proposals because of their commitment and our shared commitment, of course, to moving immigration reform forward and protecting Dreamers and others. And so the president supports those efforts, and certainly he has long stated his support for immigration being a part of reconciliation. That's really the next step in the process, but there are a number of members who are already working on that.
Immigration in Haiti?
I'll go to you next, April. Let me just go ahead.
Well, I'll start there.
Okay.
So the crisis in the border in Del Rio, we heard DHS say they're going to continue expulsions under Title 42. So what is the White House's message to Haitian immigrants seeking asylum? Is there a place for them?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand a couple of the components of what's happening right now on the ground. One, we extended TPS several months ago and again reevaluated to ensure that we were taking into account what was happening on the ground in Haiti. So that I understand, but that does apply to people who are here who arrived before a certain date, and I think that's an important component of what's happening. If you're talking about the situation on the ground in Del Rio, one, it's a challenging situation. It's devastating to watch this footage. I think it's important, though, for people to also know that what we're trying to do is also protect people. One, we've been conveying that this is not the time to come. We have been implementing Title 42. That's not just about people in the United States. That's also about protecting migrants who would come in mass groups and be in mass groups. We are also surging resources and taking a multi-pronged approach. We've been working with the American Red Cross to bring in much needed resources. We've worked with World Central Kitchen to bring in meals, and we have been expediting repatriation flights, both to a range of countries in South and Central America where people may have come from if they can be accepted back, and some back to Haiti. That is what our focus is on at this point in time. And our message continues to be, as you've heard Secretary Mayorkas convey, now is not the time to come. For a range of reasons, including we don't have the immigration system up and running in the way we want, including there is still a pandemic and Title 42 remains in place. And these are the steps that we're taking in part to protect the border communities as well as the migrants themselves.
Different topic quickly. There will be a government shutdown if Congress doesn't act in 10 days. Can you tell us what the impact of a government shutdown would be on the COVID response from this White House?
Well, our effort right now is to prevent a government shutdown and to ensure we are not facing a government shutdown. And as we get closer, we can certainly discuss that. But right now, that's where our energies are. Go ahead, April.
Jen, back on Haiti. I hear that, but digging in the weeds a little bit more, the process for Haitian migrants has always in this nation been different than other nations. You have people like Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee, who's calling for equal treatment and fairness when it comes to the Haitians at the border. And overall, you're allowing Afghans to come in, Afghan supporters to come in, as well as Mexicans, and then Haitians are not allowed. Can you speak to that, the issue of equity and fairness?
Absolutely, April, and I appreciate your question. Let me just take these different pieces side by side, right? One, our immigration policy is not about one country or discriminating against one country over another. We want to end that and hopefully put an end to what we saw over the last 4 years. Let me start with Afghan allies. Afghans who are arriving in our country are entering in a sanctioned an orderly process that includes vetting and security screenings led by the Departments of State, Defense, and Homeland Security. It's not about one particular country of origin, but we've outlined very specifically in here what those processes look like as individuals who are evacuated go to lily pad countries, go through security vetting before they come to the United States on a range of programs. as it relates to individuals who are coming across the border, wherever they're coming from, whatever country they're coming from. Title 42 remains in place. There are a range of programs that people who are in the country can apply for or may be eligible for, including TPS for Haiti, which is something that we still are continuing to look at and review. The Secretary of State, the Secretary of Homeland Security are constantly assessing circumstances on the ground that would necessitate a TPS designation for any country. And they've obviously made a couple of designations over the course of the last couple of months as it relates to Haiti.
And no matter whether it's the people who left, the Haitians that left in 2010 and traveled to South America and now trying to travel here, or the ones who left after this earthquake, either way, what is there for them to go back to when these planes are taking them back? The nation is in unrest. The president was assassinated. There are gangs that people are they're scared of. Democratic rule is not necessarily in place. The people are calling, particularly those here in this nation, are calling for the elections not to be held, on time because of unrest there. And then you also have the issue of the earthquakes. So what is there to go back to? What are you deporting them back to?
Well, April, I will say that our objective and our focus is not only in implementing current immigration policies. We have also been working to provide a range of assistance, working closely with officials from the government as individuals are going back to Haiti, to provide a range of financial assistance, to provide a range of technical assistance. That is ongoing. And we certainly support and want to be good actors in supporting Haiti during a very difficult time, as you noted, with a government that is still working to get back to a point of stability with recovery from an earthquake. And that's why we have a range of programs, options, as well as financial support in place. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. To follow up on Ed's question on immigration, in the big picture right now, how confident is the president that he'll be able to enact some sort of long-term pathway to legal status for millions of undocumented immigrants at some point before the midterms, whether it's through reconciliation or through some
It's a long time before the midterms. I know that's a tough thing for you to hear, but it's a long time before the midterms. I can't give a projection for you. It depends on a lot of factors, including working with members of Congress. What I can tell you, though, is that the president is absolutely committed to putting in place a path to citizenship, to putting in place long overdue measures to fix our immigration system, to make it more moral, humane, and workable, frankly. And obviously, he supported and continues to support having immigration measures as a part of the reconciliation process. And as I noted to Ed, the next step is really to see alternatives and proposed by senators who have already said they have every intention of doing exactly that.
Along the same lines, just to follow up on that, we've also seen the parliamentarian rule against the effort to increase the minimum wage through a reconciliation bill. We've seen other priorities on the Hill that both the president and Democrats campaigned on, police reform, gun control, also stalled there. Is there a recognition in the White House now that some of the priorities that he and the party campaigned for last year are just simply not going to happen, not going to become reality before the midterms?
No. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Back to the drone strike. You said last
Securities team and see what that process will look like.
A question about what's going on at the border. Is somebody asking the foreign nationals who are walking into Del Rio, Texas and setting up camps on this side of the border for proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test?
Well, first of all, I can readdress for you or re-talk you through what steps we take.
That is the policy for people who fly into the country. So if somebody walks into the country, right across the river, does somebody ask them to see their vaccination card?
Well, let me explain to you again, Peter, how our process works. As individuals come across the border, and they are both assessed for whether they have any symptoms. If they have symptoms, the intention is for them to be quarantined. That is our process. They're not intending to stay here for a lengthy period of time. I don't think it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. These are individuals, as we've noted and as we've been discussed. We are expelling individuals based on Title 42. Specifically because of COVID, because we want to prevent a scenario where large numbers of people are gathering, posing a threat to the community and also to the migrants themselves. So those are the policies that we put in place, in large part because, again, the CDC continues to recommend Title 42 be in place, given we're facing a global pandemic.
Where's the vice president on any of this? Isn't she supposed to be addressing the root causes of migration?
Absolutely, and she has been addressing the root causes of migration by working with countries in the region to ensure they have the assistance they need to reduce the number of people who are coming and trying to make those journeys across the border. We've actually seen some reductions in some of those numbers. That doesn't change the fact that this is a very challenging situation in Del Rio. We're working to implement our policies, and we're working to ensure we are also addressing root causes.
Just a quick one on boosters. Why did the president say in August, just remember as a simple rule, 8 months after your second shot, get a booster shot if there is not enough data to support that for the general population?
Well, what the president also said is that I want to be very clear. The plan is pending the FDA conducting an independent evaluation of the safety and effectiveness of a third dose of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines and the CDC's advisory committee. We are right now in the week of September 20th. The advisory committee is meeting on Thursday. We've seen some recommendations that we felt was a step forward in providing more protection to people across the country, and we'll wait for that process to play out. Our objective and our role is to ensure we have the capacity, the number of shots to provide them to the American people.
16 out of 18 FDA advisors say there is not the science. The president talks about
in terms of how the proof of process will work, which is a very good question. That's part of what the implementation interagency discussions will focus on.
So we'll have an answer before November?
Yes, exactly. Hopefully sooner than that. Go ahead.
Just a technical thing on the international travel policy. You talk about unvaccinated Americans. What about like green card holders, visa holders? Would they, people who, who under the current travel policy can get into the country, would they have to be vaccinated, or would they have to do the testing protocol like Americans?
That's a really good question. I'll have to ask what the specification is there for them.
And then on immigration and the parliamentarians' ruling, you've sort of gotten at this, but I'm just wondering about the president's level of commitment to this being in the reconciliation bill. Does it have to be in reconciliation? Is there a point at which it gets thrown overboard like the minimum wage did? And are there any concerns about losing certain senators, Democratic senators, who insist that this be in there?
Well, as our comment last night made very clear, the president absolutely supports efforts by senators who've already come forward. Leader Schumer has, other senators, about introducing alternate proposals and seeing if they can work their way through the process. So that's where we stand right now. I think that reflects his commitment, but obviously we don't determine the outcome of the parliamentarian process.
Jen, go ahead.
Jen, a follow-up question on Haiti. There are photographs and reports of border agents on horseback using what appear to be whips on Haitian migrants. Does the administration view that as an appropriate tactic? Can you speak to that? There are people who are upset about it.
Yeah, understandably so. I've seen some of the footage. I don't have the full context. I can't imagine what context would make that appropriate, but I don't have additional details. And certainly, I don't have additional context. April, I don't think anyone seeing that footage would think it was acceptable or appropriate.
And the DHS said it will be, said Saturday that federal agencies will be partnering with the Haitian government to provide assistance to the returnees. Can you elaborate on what that assistance will entail exactly?
You mean to the people who are returning to Haiti? Yes, we've been in close contact with the government about when people return, what that looks like. Let me get you some more additional details about what that looks like when they get on the ground. Go ahead, Yamiche.
Thanks so much, Jen. I want to follow up on the question about Haitians and it's specifically these photos that are surfacing on Border Patrol agents seemingly using whips. I know you said that there's no context that it would be seen as inappropriate, so the question really is, why would this be happening under the Biden administration? Is this going to stop? What would I wonder sort of what are going to be the consequences if what we're seeing is what we're seeing?
I mean, Yamiche, it's all good questions. We just saw this footage. It's horrible to watch. I just have to get more information on it. Again, April, I don't have more information on it. I've also seen the video. I can't imagine what the scenario is where that would be appropriate. I'm certainly not suggesting that, but we've just seen the footage earlier this morning.
Also ask, I was talking to Haitian American advocates this weekend. They say that deporting people back to Haiti is like dropping people into a burning house. This idea that the country is just not in a place where it can handle this. Haitian officials have said, can you please have a pause on this? Is there any sort of discussion being made to make exemptions for some of these migrants? If so, who would those people be? Or are all of these people just going to end up dropped back in Haiti?
Well, First, I would say, we are constantly assessing circumstances on the ground. Obviously, the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Homeland Security are the ones who would assess circumstances like TPS status, which would be one that we granted and adjusted over the course of the last several months to account for circumstances on the ground in Haiti. Can't make any predictions of that, but I would just reiterate that obviously our objective here is to not just work to address the circumstances, which are very difficult in Del Rio, but also to continue to work with the officials in Haiti to improve the conditions, to provide assistance. We're doing all of these pieces at the same time. It is not just one at the same time, but I can't predict for you what an assessment would look like or what the outcome of that assessment would look like.
On the photo, I know you said that you're still assessing it, but just to add, if this is what we see, is it the president's stance or the White House's stance that whoever these border agents are using what seems to be whips on migrants, that they would be fired or at least never be able to do that again?
Of course, they should never be able to do it again. I don't know what the circumstances would be. It's obviously horrific, the footage. I don't have any more information on it, so let me venture to do that, and we'll see if there's more to convey. Karen, go ahead. I think, April, I absolutely understand your question. I think I've been very clear about how horrific the footage is. I don't have more information. As a U.S. official, I have a responsibility to get more context and information. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Too, on COVID, does the White House have an expectation now on when kids younger than 12?
Discussed pretty extensively here. CDC is going to issue a contact tracing order that will require airlines to collect comprehensive contact information for every passenger coming to the United States and to provide that information promptly to the CDC upon request, to follow up with travelers who have been exposed to COVID-19 variants or other pathogens. And these requirements will apply globally. That's a good example of where some of the considerations as we were making these policy decisions, we had to account for and plan for and ensure that we could implement this policy in a way that was clear, that was equitable, that provided, that ensured that there was equal treatment around the world of how people could come into the United States given COVID protocols. But that's an important question. We wanted to make sure we addressed a lot of those internally as well. Go ahead.
Also on the international travel announcement, it did not include an opening of the land border north or south. Is administration worried that any easing at the southern border would be contributing to the immigration problems, and was that a factor in that decision?
Well, this is an ongoing process, right? Title 19 is what is in place, of course, at land borders. It's being extended for another month through October 21st. We don't have any updates or predictions at this point in time, but obviously we're continuing to consider, as is evident by our announcement today, how we can return to a place of travel and people being able to move from country to country, including at our land borders. But I don't have any prediction of that at this point.
Jen?
Go ahead.
You may not have seen this because it happened just minutes before you came up, but the Supreme Court
From support of this as well this morning. I know different question, but same pool of topics. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Following up on Haiti, some of the Haitian migrants at the border told VOA that they were treated worse than their Spanish-speaking counterparts. That they were denied the chance to change clothing, that they were not given adequate information on their deportation or their deportation status. And we had one guy say to us, it was like being in jail. No food, nothing. You know, what is your response to this? Is this policy? And then just secondly, Haitian Americans say that this mass deportation and this treatment of people at the border is the president going back on campaign promises to their community.
In which campaign promise?
To help them kind of get over some of the challenges facing Haiti and also to help people migrate to the U.S.
Well, the president committed to extending temporary protected status to Haiti, which is something he did. And we extended that to a longer period of time to account for the turmoil on the ground following the assassination on the ground of their leader. So that was the campaign commitment that he made. But I think I can assure people that that is not our policy. Obviously, any circumstance where individuals are not treated humanely, whether they are coming to our border or not, is not in line with the Biden administration policies. This is clearly a very challenging circumstance on the ground, one where we have worked under our Department of Homeland Security to expedite surge resources, which includes World Central Kitchen bringing in meals, the American Red Cross bringing in much-needed resources to the population. These are all steps we've taken from a humanitarian perspective. It does not mean that every individual, that there aren't individuals, as you evidence, that didn't have experiences where they did not have access to these resources. But our policy is to provide resources, is to treat people humanely. But we also need to implement what is our law and what is our and what that is implementing Title 42 and continuing to ensure that people who are not coming here lawfully are sent back to the countries they came from. Go ahead. Okay, last one.
Two
Okay.
questions.
Yep.
On the French sub deal, Lockheed Martin had a major